I went into this episode expecting a pure fish out of water comedy, and instead I just kept waiting for it to hit harder than it ever actually did.
Since you're all here and I have no choice, you may as well hear the bad news. Uncle Henry died.
Eatin Out has all the ingredients of a classic Bundy episode. Money they don't deserve, a place they don't belong, and social rules they absolutely refuse to respect. And what surprised me is that for an episode built entirely around excess, it often feels a little muted. The Bundys are funniest when they're fighting scarcity, when they're trapped, cornered, or humiliated. Here they get indulgence instead. And while there are still good jokes, the edge isn't quite as sharp as the setup promises. And that doesn't make it bad, it just makes it interesting. So with that in mind, welcome back to The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the 11th episode of the 3rd season of Married with Children, titled Eatin Out, written by Sandy Sprong and Marcy Vosberg, and directed by Jerry Cohen. So let's see how this one stacks up, starting with the episode overview. So we open the episode with Al and Peggy coming down the stairs, talking about going somewhere for a week. They seem like they're kind of in a rush, and Al is asking Peggy, did you shut everything off? And by everything, I mean everything. The water, the electricity, the heat, the phone. And after they confirm all this, Peggy asks, do you think we should have told the kids we were going? That's so messed up. They're planning on taking a week-long trip because Peg's uncle died and has left them money. Of course, in typical Bundy fashion, we learn that they don't actually know that he's left them money. They just assume. But as they walk out the door, they say sort of out loud in the house, we assume to the kids who are maybe sleeping upstairs, so long, suckers. Some good parenting happening here. But the kids are outside waiting for them and catch them on the way out. How did they know to be waiting for them outside? Well, they were clued in when Peg packed them a lunch. And Al is clearly annoyed at Peg for doing this. And the kids think they deserve a piece of the inheritance. After all, Kelly pretended to be his mom while he was going senile. And this is the scene where we find out that they didn't actually get the money yet. Also, the mailman shows up, knocks on the door. What mailman is delivering your mail by knocking on the door? I mean, I guess if you had a package, but they didn't have a package. And I get that this is so that they can get the inheritance check and keep moving the plot forward, but it's still goofy. Unfortunately for the Bundys, the inheritance is only $237. And they all have ideas on how to spend it. The kids want to get concert tickets to see the band Tears and Vomit. Al wants to do something else, and then Peggy's like, where's the fun in this death for me? Now, just in time, the Rhodeses are going to show up at the door. Why? They just had a great prime rib and are bringing the bone to the Bundys for Buck. Now, it's not the flimsiest reason they've given for the Rhodeses showing up, but it's pretty close. So why are they really there? They're there to give the Bundys an idea of how to spend their newfound wealth, so that we can keep the plot moving, and also so that Amanda Bierce and David Garrison can get paid. So they suggest going out to eat, hence the name of the episode. Now, Peggy likes this idea because she remembers the last time they went out to eat somewhere fancy. It was when Kelly was a baby. Peg's mom gave them money to get Kelly booster shots. But Kelly was crying so much that they decided to go out and eat instead. She had whooping cough for a week, but they've remembered that meal for a lifetime. So all the bad parenting stuff is being front-loaded here so that we're not upset as the audience at what Bud and Kelly do at the end. Also, the bone that the Rhodeses brought over still had just a little bit of meat on it, so everyone is expecting that to be dinner. And after the Rhodeses leave and the Bundys are distracted talking to each other, Buck grabs the bone and Al starts yelling, "Dog's got our food! Dog's got our food!" But after that, we're headed to the restaurant. There's dancing and live music. It's a fancy place. And Al has, of course, made their reservation under the name Mr. Warren Beatty and Family. And before they actually get to their seat, they spot a table that has their food, and they basically just start drooling over it. Like, can you cut open the steak for me so I can see it? Ooh, I want that. And I was trying to think of how I would react to somebody doing this to me in a restaurant. And as amusing as it is to see on TV, I'm pretty sure that I would get really annoyed really quickly. Anyway, when we get to their table, we get a joke about Kelly doing things that she's too young to be doing. When Al, then Peggy, and then Bud all say they want a Coke when they're asked if they want cocktails. But Kelly asks for a Jack and a beer back, which she then covers for by saying that's teen slang for Coke. But the Bundys don't need a menu either. They want 4 steaks and nuke them. And the waiter's gonna be like, do you want potatoes? And Al says, how much more are they? But then the waiter says, no, they come with the meal. So after he finds that out, Al's like, potatoes for everyone. So there are a lot of little fun bits throughout the restaurant scenes. Like Peg asks Al if he wants to dance, and he's like, "You wouldn't mind?" And she's like, "Of course not." And then he turns around and asks the woman behind him if she wants to dance. Or when they actually are dancing, and Bud makes a comment about how old they are, but then Kelly kind of nudges him and she's like, "It's sweet. You can see how much they still love each other." And then the camera pans over to them, and Peg's like, "Couldn't you have worn deodorant, you pig?" Or when the food is being delivered to their table, they're banging on the table and chanting, "Chow time, chow time, chow time." All of this, of course, to show that they're an uncouth family that doesn't belong in a fancy establishment. Sort of a classic juxtaposition that this show likes to do. But you know what? They do it because it's funny and it works. Now we're going to start to hear their thoughts right before they dig into their food. Bud is sexually aroused by his steak, which is weird. And I'm not saying it's weird because it's a weird joke. I'm saying it's weird because he's supposed to be like, 13, 14 years old? It just felt weird to me. Kelly's voiceover says that she just knew you had to cook potatoes. Not only is this an amusing thought, but I have a good friend who eats potatoes raw, which just sounds absolutely awful to me. And it made me wonder, are there any other people out there besides him that do this? Let me know in the comments if you're a raw potato eater. But Peggy is worried. Her voiceover is saying that she's worried that they're gonna see this good food and look at her with contempt, which they do. Then we get Al, who is praying to God with complaints. There are people that get to eat like this all the time. Even animals at the zoo eat better than me. Basically, could you rectify this? And then they start eating, which is just a bunch of moaning and noises. I cannot even imagine hearing this while I was eating at a restaurant. Al even says "mama" at one point. This actually goes on for a surprisingly long time too. And when they're finally done, there's only one thing that could top off this experience for Al. He asks the waiter for a newspaper and heads off to the bathroom. Shitting is what will top off this experience for Al. And once Al's back from his shit, which we'll find out later overflowed the toilet, as he seems to be wont to do, they're ready to pay the bill. Al did the math in his head and is positive that the check is going to come out to $225 and change. Now, I thought the joke was going to be that he got the number wrong and it's way higher than they expected. But no, he got it exactly right. But there was still a twist coming, though. He forgot his wallet. No problem, though, right? He's going to send the kids back to the house to go pick up the wallet and bring it back. But Kelly decides that now that they have the money, they could still go to the Tears and Vomit concert, which the show has already primed us from the earlier bad parenting stuff to know is coming and be okay with. And when we cut back to Al and Peg, Al's like, "It's been 2.5 hours, Peg. It's safe to say that the kids have left us here to die." But Al gets ideas on how they can get out of this, like tangoing out of the restaurant, which doesn't work. His other idea is to go around to the other tables and convince the other patrons that he knows them from way back and that they owe him money. He's actually able to pull together $70 from doing this. But then he runs into somebody who actually does know him, and that somebody was owed $50 by Al, and so Al had to pay him. So he ends up with $20 after all that. But Peg's worried. She's like, "What are they gonna do to us?" And Al's like, "Well, for me, they're probably gonna beat me up and throw me in a dumpster, but it won't be so bad for you. They'll probably just make you do some dishes." But then Peg instantly, with a look of fear on her face, is like, "Dishes?" So the fear of washing dishes sends Peggy into flight or fight mode. She demands Al give her his shoes. And when he finally does, they're able to leave the restaurant because his shoes smell so bad that nobody wants to come near them as Peggy is holding up his shoes. One of the women in the restaurant even says, as if Peggy were holding a gun, "She's got a shoe." The plan works. They're on their way out. Peg tells Al that's like a great time that she's having, and then they leave. But Peg's got one more move to make. She comes back into the restaurant with one of his socks and says, "And don't try to follow us," and then drops the sock to the ground. And that is the entire ridiculous episode. Let's find out how it ranked.
Rank.
So the rankings where I ranked the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive into the rankings here, I just want to say if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. And the story is that the Bundys get a small inheritance from an uncle passing. A very small inheritance. And they decide to go out to dinner with that money. Unfortunately, Al forgets his wallet, and they have to figure out a way out of the predicament. Honestly, that's a solid sitcom story. I gave it a 4.5. Then we go to acting. I actually thought the acting was really good in this episode. Even the guest stars did pretty well. I enjoyed the waitstaff and how annoyed they were with the Bundys. And maybe I'm just getting used to David Faustino, but I feel like he's getting better. All in all, a pretty well-acted episode. I gave it a 4. That brings us to dialogue. You know, I felt like the premise would have led to a funnier episode. It was still funny, but it felt like the jokes were kind of light and not all of them hit that hard. Now, they won't all be winners, but I was slightly disappointed by this one. I gave it a 2.75. And that brings us to episode coherence. Bud and Kelly were mean to each other but worked together a little bit. Al and Peg were mean to each other but they worked together a little bit. That's pretty coherent with the series. The plot was relatively tight. I think there were only a couple things that don't really make much sense. One is the Rhodes coming over to give Buck a bone, but they've had worse excuses for coming over. And 2 is the fact that they were leaving the house before actually getting the inheritance. That one does seem a little glaring though. I ended up giving it a 3.5. So that brings us to character relatability. This is such a tough category for this show sometimes, because there aren't very many people that would act like this. But I think it's relatable to a certain degree, that the kids would be selfish and go to the concert. It's relatable to want to go out to a nice meal after you get some money, but there's not much else to go on with this one. So I gave it a 2.25. All right, that brings us to the laugh counter, and we're going to need a fairly decent laugh counter to keep it in the top 3 tiers, and it got me 14 times, so pretty decent. This puts the episode total at a 31, which makes it an I'd watch it again. For the series, the average is now at a 33.56, which keeps the series as an I'd watch it again. And if you're ranking along with me, drop your score in the comments, especially the laugh counter. But thanks for listening and or watching. Check out my other Married with Children episodes or any of my other sitcom or movie episodes on this channel. Remember to subscribe, like, and comment. For full rankings, you can check that out on my website at therankpodcast.com, where you can also email me at john@therankpodcast.com. And if you really want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But for now, I'll leave you with this. In the original ending that got cut, Al claims to have lost his appetite. Why? Because the episode ends on Peggy in bed chanting chow time.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And social rules they refuse to
Cut!
And social rules they
We're gonna be here a while.